What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Sunday Slaughter podcast. And this week, I have my regular co-host, Charles. What's up, man?
Whoop, whoop. What's happening, everybody?
And then we also have Max. It's been a little bit since you've been on the show. How you been?
Good, man. Thanks for inviting me back.
Of course. And then we have Brandon, who is number one, the winner of the Gamers Haven 30-point tournament. He is also a local player that runs a lot of the demo games for us. So he's a huge part of why we have a growing community. He's always willing to sit down and teach players how the game works. He gives them suggestions on what to buy. Really big champion regarding the game in our local scene. So welcome, Brandon, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the kind words.
Of course. And you've been featured on a battle report before. I believe you were playing Ario, and I got completely stomped. It was it's just one of those games.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Big congratulations to you. Let's just get a little background on you as a person. So how long have you been wargaming, and how long have you been playing A Song of Ice and Fire?
Well, I started Song of Ice and Fire, I think December 2019. I actually used to be really big in the Warhammer 40K. I took about, I'd say, 6 years away from gaming. Got married, had some kids. Just recently decided to come back and start gaming again, and fell in love with the Song of Ice and Fire. And now I have like 5 armies, so the addiction's real.
Oh yeah, I know all about that. Although you have 5 armies, which ones do you have? 1 or 2 that you always go back to, or you would consider your favorite?
I'm a huge fan of the Lannisters, and Night's Watch probably my top 2.
You brought Night's Watch to this last tournament.
Correct. Yep.
We'll get into the list that you brought and how your games went. One thing I think it would be really great for listeners to learn about is how you approach bringing new players into the game. Because, like I said, you're always willing to run demo games, and you're a big component as to why our scene is growing. So, do you like doing that stuff? I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy bringing more players to the game. It's a game that I love, so I'm always willing to do it. I try to approach it based on the player. If they don't have any wargaming experience, in those regards, I try to play with the hands open to help them with triggers on the tactics cards and stuff like that. And I take it a lot slower. And then someone who maybe is coming over from 40K or Malifaux or one of the other tabletop games, I just make sure they understand, as much as possible. And I'll explain what I'm doing while I'm doing it. And if I see them maybe missing a great opportunity move, I'll kind of explain why I think they might want to do that instead of what they were going to do.
Who taught you how to play the game?
I just remember I suckered Gary in the Gamers Haven one day. I was a big Game of Thrones fan, and me and him both bought in. So I think we kind of learned it together, and then I think maybe Max or Bob. Max, were you one of the ones that helped show me how to play?
Yeah, I think I was there for that demo. Definitely with you, your original group. Getting everybody moving along. I think Bob was a big part of that though too. So I won't take all the credit for that.
So Bob was actually the one who ran my first demo game. I don't know if you guys adhere to the golden rule where you always let your opponent win, but Bob definitely did not do that with me. So Max, do you have a similar approach? You, Bob, and Brandon are usually one of the ones that run demo games for newer players. How do you approach it?
Yeah, so usually I'll knock the score down to like 20 to 25 points too. Just so they have like maybe 2 or 3 units on the table and maybe 1 NCU. Because for a lot of people, the concept of having all those cards and all those NCUs and those units, you get that analysis paralysis, which we still get, today when we're playing the game and we know what we're doing. So I try not to let that happen for a demo. So I put like 2 to 3 units on the table, usually like 1 range unit, 1 cav unit, 1 infantry unit. Play with an open hand, like Brandon said, and 1 NCU. And usually it's one of the lower tier NCU. Like Baratheon, you might bring Shira. Lannisters, you might bring Pycelle. Someone that has like a very straightforward mechanic. Usually, I'll run just a kill each other game, even though I know a long time ago Michael Chanel said that's not how he likes to run demos because so many of the game modes are objective based. But I think it's important just to understand how combat works and your cards and the NCU, that I think it's better to just throw them into some combat. And yeah, usually, I mean, the golden rule is I usually let whoever I'm demoing completely throttle me. But I guide them through that. And I'll even point out parts where I'm like, okay, you don't just tell them like, oh yeah, I just let you kick my ass. It's more one of those things where we're playing together as the demoees army. And then I'm just dummy running my army against it. So you're even pointing out like, look, I wouldn't know what cards you have. So I might walk right into this trap or this or that. So you don't just make them feel like it's pointless for them to even play that game. So you try to give that win a little bit of gravity also, so that it doesn't just feel idiotic. But yeah, that's usually how I try to set it up. I try not to put anything too complicated on the board at first. And I definitely like having the distance between the armies pretty close. So like a Fire and Blood style, 18 inches of, deployment, something like that. Throw a couple pieces of terrain out there and just go to work.
And Charles, I don't know if you've ran any demo games, but I'm sure you've had a demo game ran for you. So, do you have anything to add to that, or how did your first experience go?
Yeah, we do it a little differently. I haven't run demos myself independently, but we kind of co-op run stuff a lot of times. But the way we demoed, where I've seen this game demoed and kind of how it was demoed to me, even though I more or less had under control before I played, because I'd watched him play so much, is we tend to do similar to what Max said, where we start with like 25 points, like a generic, straightforward NCU. Usually we go with rule of cool, whatever units they think are cool in their faction, because we have all the factions kind of available, because that's more inclined to get them interested, right? Like if you want to play Followers of Bone, play Followers of Bone. If you're really into the Cav, I'm gonna give you some Telecav, right? Whatever you pick, right? Whatever you want to play. But we keep it down to 2 to 3 units on the table, plus an NCU. And we don't do tactics cards for the first, 3 turns or so. We get to where you see how scoring works in gameplay. Like, you see how combat works. You see how an objective might work. And then we tend to rewind and, redeploy. And then we add in tactics cards, and then we play, a mini game, right? We play, an actual game at that point where it's 1, maybe 2 NCUs. You get your tactics cards. But you've already played three turns or 3 rounds roughly of the game, so you're familiar with measuring, maneuvering, marching, charging, and then like Max said, I might not necessarily just let you win, but I will deliberately play into things like, oh, you're playing Baratheons. Do you got counter charge? Yeah, I got counter charge. Cool. I'm gonna charge you into this thing I would normally never charge, so you can play counter charge and see how the timing works. Right? I will deliberately play into some tactics cards based on their faction. I will ask them, hey, look, this is a really good card I'm going to play. Do you have counterplot? Okay, this is kind of one you want to counterplot because here's why this card's good. Right? And these are the types of things you're looking for if you're playing a finesse faction like Lannisters, for instance. So very similar to like Max said, getting them scrum a little bit early, kind of eliminate some of the other more complex layers, get to the core of the game. Completely covering objective to score it. So you see how your tray works. Get some charges in so you know how combat works, removing units, things like that. Morale tests. And then once we get the basics, which usually only takes 2-3 rounds, we just redeploy. And then we play with tactics cards. And because that's where the real complexity comes in, right? Like managing the tactics board versus card triggers versus all that stuff. So you got to kind of break it down a little bit.
Let's talk about any general news or updates from the community. Charles, I know that you keep your ear pretty close to the ground when it comes to different content creators and stuff like that. Was there anything notable that happened this week that you think we should talk about?
Yeah, so the Song of Ice and Fire stats guys, Mickey threw together the Is 2021 Here Yet tournament on stats. It's a TTS based thing. It's much more like a pickup game league. It's 1.6 rules. It's 40-point lists. It's basically going to just be like an auto-scheduled opponent. So you know who to play every week just to get games in until 2021 comes out. It's going to run until 2021 comes out like a league. Whoever's got the most points at the end wins. That's it. Lists aren't locked. Factions aren't locked. Nothing's locked. It's just pickup games. You know who you play. You message them your 2 lists. You agree on a day and a time. You show up. You play a game. You record it. That's going to be really good for people who are considering TTS. Maybe because they work nights and they can't make it to their game store during the day, or they're still on lockdown. It'll be the rule set, because 1.6, and it's an event that doesn't really matter. It's just pickup games, and you get to avoid the looking for group channels and all the Discords trying to find a game. So that's gonna be real cool for people looking to just get used to the interface and hang out with people and new community members. TSL from 3 Sales Gaming has announced how his structure is going to work on the pods. So as soon as 2021 drops, we have a pretty tight turnaround to when the TSL is going to fire up. And he streamed a lot of games last time around, so there'll be a lot of streaming content coming out as soon as the TSL fires up. So if you like battle reports and things like that, you'll be able to watch some stream games. That'll be super dope. Everybody and their brother is getting their Greyjoy stuff in Europe, so there's going to be a lot of painting tutorials coming out.
Oh, yeah.
So get hyped for that. You already got another 3 Sales Gaming thing. He had a giveaway a while back where 2 new players who play together are getting a starter box, basically. And it's going to be like their journey through painting their models and learning to play the game and everything together. But he worked with Grant from YeCat Studio to put together painting guides for the starter box so they could paint their models and have a guide. So there's going to be hobby content and noob friendly, my journey through the game, kind of documentary style with interviews and games and stuff coming up. That's going to be super cool, particularly for people who are looking to learn how to demo the game, because you get to see the questions completely new people would ask. That's going to be really cool. So 3 Sales has got a lot going on. George has got a ton of content planned. Stats announced that they're doing a big ELO reset when 21 comes out, including player ELOs for the most part. So if you were, wanting to jump into the ranked scene, the global scene, that's going to be a new option for you in 2021. But that's kind of the highlights. That's kind of like Sports Center tonight of Ice and Fire web community at the moment.
One of the biggest takeaways that I got from this week that you touched upon is how the UK is getting their Greyjoy boxes. I mean, they should be coming any day now. I've been seeing updates of people that have had their orders put in, and then they're getting email updates on where their package is. So I'm hoping that the US is not far behind. Brandon, are you planning on getting that starter set when it comes out?
No, I'm gonna sit this one out.
You're finally gonna take a break on a new release.
Well, I don't know if you guys noticed, but me and Tim, between the 2 of us, we have all the armies, and me and Tim, we play at least every Friday and Sunday, so we play quite a lot. So we decided he's going to go ahead and get Greyjoys, and I'm going to sit this one out, and I'll probably end up getting the next one.
Max, I know, of course, I think everyone knows at this point that you're a Baratheon loyalist, but I mean, are you looking into getting this set, or are you going to sit this one out too?
I think it'll depend on how our meta shapes up. So I think you know this at this point because I give you shit when you play my army. I don't like playing the faction that everyone else plays. So when I first bought the Kickstarter and everything, and we were doling out who was going to play what, I played the Boltons because I was the only one who had enough stuff to field the Boltons or neutrals. And then when Free Folk came out and everyone was like, these guys suck and they look like snow hobos, I was like, cool, I'll play them because nobody else wants to. But I just like the Baratheons mainly because their words are cool. Because it pretty much reminds me of my 3 kids running around this house. So I've always said I'm not a huge fan of show Baratheons. I'm more a fan of Baratheon lore and history in the world. And I just like knights, anything knight and Viking. But it's funny because when I first started playing Baratheons in our group, it was just the starter set for so long, and I was really the only person playing Baratheons regularly. But I think because the models look so great, they're a pretty damn popular bet. worldwide, or at least that's what I see. So even though they're maybe lower tier on the power scale, they look good. So people like playing them, and they have a lot of variety in the way they can be played because of the whole dual faction aspect. And then even locally, like they're just commonly played in our group, which is a little bit of a turnoff for me. So I'll probably wait to see how Greyjoys catch on in our local meta. I've actually been eyeing up real hard going back to my free folk because our regular free folk players have kind of gotten off of the bandwagon. I had eyed up free folk really hard for this tournament, but even though I brought a Mr. No Fun list, I felt like the free folk would have been kind of sinister for me to bring in a 30-point tournament. So I actually talked a lot to Bob about it before submitting my list and decided that I just didn't think it would be nice to bring insignificant spam at 30 points and do work. So I'm kind of leaning that way. I love Cthulhu lore and I like Vikings. So it's really hard for me to pass on the Greyjoys. But if there's a lot of people grabbing them, I probably won't play them just for that fact, you know.
Well, one other thing that has happened recently was Asmodee updated their store. So I'm excited for you, Max, because maybe this will keep you on the Baratheon bandwagon. But we see now the Lightbringers are coming out. We also have the Kingsmen, which were already spoiled on Facebook, but also the Queensmen. I feel bad for any Renly loyalists because it seems like Stannis is getting all the cool stuff. But I did take a look at Asmodee's store, and these models are amazing. It seems like CMON is really stepping up their sculpts with every release, which is really cool. So
definitely agree, and I'm a fan of Dark Souls franchise too, so I kind of like that all the Baratheon stuff has a little bit of that like Dark Souls art style vibe too. So yeah, I'm loving how everything in the Baratheon army looks. It's funny because I like Stannis' side more, but I would say that Rose Knights are probably my favorite models in the army, or pretty close with Stag Knights. Charles, you getting some Greyjoys?
Yeah, man, I really want to paint them up for like D&D and other stuff, but I actually after they spoiled the rest of the Heroes box, where I was kind of like on the fence with them after playing them in the Slaughterhouse and stuff, like I felt like they had a lot of conflicts with how they wanted to perform. The Heroes box solves a lot of those like mechanical kind of non-synergies that were happening. The Heroes box helps a lot. And there's a couple of things I really want to play. Like I think Windermere is probably the best designed, actual like elegant designed NCU in the game, but also kind of bonkers and almost busted in its own way as well. So like, there's a couple of things in Raiders I'm pretty excited about actually. So I'm gonna give them a run. I'm probably actually gonna play them almost exclusively in this is 2021 Here Yet event that Mickey's putting together. Yeah, just to get a feel for them.
I think that's enough about the rumblings going on in the community right now. You should just go ahead and jump into the main topic, which is results of the 30-point tournament that we had last weekend. So right here, I have pulled up the Song of Ice and Fire stats page, and just doing a quick breakdown. We had 2 Stark players, 3 Lannister players, 2 neutrals, 3 Night's Watch, 1 Free Folk, 2 Baratheons, and 1 Targaryen, which was piloted poorly by Lord Commander Bob. Shout out to him for bringing a less than par list to the tournament. And Max, we can hear about how it went for Bob, because I believe that you two were paired up against each other round 1, which actually worked out for me because I didn't want to play you, and I didn't want to play Bob round 1. But as I stated before, Brandon did take first place. So I think we should just start with you, Brandon. Can you just give a quick rundown of your 2 lists?
So, most people, when they see Night's Watch, Jon Snow is probably one of the ones that they would always consider bringing to a tournament. His ability to keep things alive and the extra healing with him sitting in vets makes that a absolutely tank unit. I also brought Gior. I like him in some Sworn Brothers. I feel like that makes that unit almost just as good as the vets by the increased morale. and the ability to hold 2 vows. I ended up not running Geor this tournament. I faced all Ramsey commanders, and just with the game
All 3
modes,
matches?
yeah, all 3 of them. So just with the game modes, my Jon Snow list also had 1 extra activation than Geor did, so that also played a huge factor for me.
So did you bring Geor for any particular matchup? Because you said you didn't play him once.
I was kind of thinking about running him for Clash of Kings, which I thought was one of the game modes for sure. I think it was one of the 5. It just didn't get picked that day. Because I just thought him coming back in a unit of Sworn Brothers could really do some work for me. With the Sworn Brothers hitting as hard as they do.
Were there any highlights throughout the tournament? Maybe a quick breakdown of your opponents that you played and how the matches turned out.
Me and Tim, we were kind of going back and forth a lot. I think he didn't fail 1 panic test until the very end of the match, and it was the one that cost him Roose Bolton, and it put me over, so I ended up winning. But it was a brutal battle between me and Tim. The second game, honestly, I was kind of getting smashed. I didn't kill 1 model against Stefan. He brought Scorpion and the Watch Marshal and was using the Watch Marshal's order to just keep moving the Scorpion around. And I luckily had Aemon healing, so I was able to survive for a little while. But at the end of the game, I didn't kill one of his models. That was the Game of Thrones match, and I was able to put Jon Snow on a node, Ghost, and a Watch Marshal. So got 4 points round 2, 4 points round 3, and I just couldn't get near him. The third match against Derek, the thing that I remember the most is I was able to use Watcher on the Wall to get some Sworn Brothers into the rear of Flayed Men, activated them, charged in. I did 5 wounds, and I was shocked by that. He had Psycho, fully healed him. It was like I did nothing, and he charged his Cutthroats into my Sworn Brothers and one-shotted them. So that was probably the first thing that really stood out in that game. And but I had to use Ghost. I don't know if they're going to be changing that or not, but I used him to run up and grab the node turn 1 and just start retreating and dance with dragons. And he was running a slower army, so he couldn't catch me. And I used my conscripts to also get in front of Ghost, so he'd have to go through them first. I ended up just getting a lot of points that way, and I think that's how I ended up. The only reason I got ahead of you was because of the victory points, because I think you destroyed way more than I did as a whole in the tournament.
We'll get into how close it was between you and I, but I'm going to turn it over to the third place loser of the 3 of us, Max. So, Max, we talked about what you could have been bringing in the last podcast, and I think I was pretty spot on what I thought you were going to bring. So, do you want to do a quick rundown of your 2 lists and how your tournament went?
I had a list that I wanted to make sure, because at least half of our field was very novice. They were either like old returning players like Derek, who hasn't played a game in maybe 6 months, or they were like brand new. This was their first tournament. Some of these people have only been playing the game a few months. So I had a Renly list that was pretty vanilla. It was, I guess vanilla. It had Rose Knights in it with Renly, but then it was like some Stormcrow Archers, some Cutthroats, just a couple NCUs, Shira. It looked actually a lot like your Renly list, except Brienne was in Bastards instead of Sentinels. And that was going to be the list that I would run against newer players. But then I had my Bob list that I would run against Bob. And that was Roose and Roose Commander with Mel, Axel, and Axel as 2 other NCUs. And then I had a unit of Bastards Girls with a Red Priestess in there. And then a unit of Wardens, unit of Cutthroats, and Dragonstone Noble. So I ran that list against Bob, and it did pretty good. You know how Mel goes. You either roll good or you don't. And Bob didn't roll great. And, I think by the third round, he was walking around with like an Outriders unit with like 2 wounds on it. Now, the highlight for Bob in that was he was pretty damn chippy about it and was real angry. But I was like still playing him kind of serious because he's a great player. And he got his Outriders into the flank of one of my units and one-shot it from full health with a unit Outriders with 2 wounds on it left. With cards from Jorah and I think Superior Flanking is what that was called. And he just completely evaporated one of my units. Then he was like all smiles and I was pissed off because I was like, dude, I feel like you've given up on the game here. And that game mode was Fire and Blood too. So taking an NCU commander wasn't necessarily like great for the game mode itself because I basically had to go for the table because I wasn't going to be scoring those extra points. But I knew that, and that was kind of something I had in my head when we were running this, was that it was the new game modes, and I kind of wanted to see how an NCU commander would do in them because I think it was Bob's idea that we would allow NCU commanders. I was actually against it, even though ironically I ran one. But my point of being against it was that I still thought it was too strong. And I even ran a demo game of this list against Stefan before the tournament and clobbered him pretty hard and was trying to rally Bob to back off on the NCU commanders thing. But he felt that the game modes would benefit a commander so much on the field that it wouldn't matter. In our game, Chris, it clearly seemed to help actually that you having the field commander versus me not. You want me to go through basically my 3 games? I mean, that was my first one against Bob. Second one, I ran against Gary. So then, Gary's been playing the game for a while. The funny thing was Bob then called me out for who I should run the Roos list against. And he said, other than himself, I should run it against you, Chris, and then Brandon, and then Tim. And I guess because like I always think of Brandon, Tim, and Gary as like Cerberus, like the 3-headed dog, like they just come as a trio. I get my brain just put Gary in that pile, and I ended up playing Gary as my next game. And I was like, well, Bob told me I need to run Roos against Gary. So I ran Roos against Gary. Gary actually was playing neutrals and ran Roos as well. The other piece was you couldn't bring, if you were neutrals, you were allowed to bring Varys or Walder, but we put a little caveat in there that you couldn't bring Varys or Walder if you weren't bringing neutrals, which I really liked. So he had Varys actually. But I basically did the same exact setup and strategy in all 3 of my games, which I call a can opener, where I try to open up the middle of someone's army and then sweep to one side. And I use the Bastards Girls with Red Priestess and Mel to do that. And I did it in the game against Bob, can opener them, and then got into the back of them and tagged some vets and were able to beat them up. Same thing happened against Gary, but kind of worse because I got behind him and then he kept trying to turn around or trying to back up, but not turn around. He kept just basically throwing his units in reverse so that he could get into my line of sight. And then I just kept grabbing the maneuver zone or activating them and just marching them further towards his deployment zone so he could never see them. Not a piece of the game that I love, but it was a tournament. So I kept messing with him so much so that at one point in time, one of the judges for the best painted came by and thought my unit was Gary's unit. It was like, wow, Gary, you're a really good painter. I didn't even know that. And Gary played it off like it was his unit because it was Bastards Girls. It like made sense. So I loved playing Gary. I will say I ended up being able to pull off the table on him, but he is a ton of fun to play. He's one of those guys that like, even when things are going terribly and on top of everything, he was like rolling horribly too. But like he laughs real easy and he's like one of those shit talkers that like everything that comes out of his mouth makes me laugh too. You like genuinely feel bad when you're beating him and when he's rolling like crap too. Like I don't know how many times I apologized to him when he would roll his dice and be like, I'm sorry, man, that sucks. Afterwards, he told on me to my dad because my dad owns the store. He tattled on me, and then Bob threw me under the bus too and was like, dude, I didn't say play that list against Gary. I said Tim and Brandon. So we had a lot of fun with that one. And then by that point in time, I think I was just committed to Roos. So even when Dance of Dragons rolled around and I was playing you, Chris, I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to play this dude for 3 games.
I didn't get to see your list, Max. How come me and Tim got targeted for it?
I don't know. That was a Bob idea. You'll have to ask Bob that. He basically, I think just because it's one of those, like, if you're rolling bad, it's just going to dust you off the table type of things. I think he felt like I wouldn't want to run that again. Well, I felt like I didn't want to run it against anyone else but Bob. But afterwards, Bob was like, yeah, you can run that against Brandon and Tim. So I think that's Bob giving you guys high accolade for how good you are at the game. Apparently Gary doesn't get included in that, so I don't know what that's about. I don't know what that's but
For everyone in the audience that doesn't know Gary, so you can check out what we're talking about in one of my battle reports. I played Gary. It was Stannis versus Renly, and it was one of the most fun games I've ever played. It was a lot of laughs, so definitely check out that video on my YouTube. Before you go into our match, Max, I would like to add that I think Gary's list was probably the list that was best suited to take you down during the tournament, just because of 2 cards within the neutral deck, which are Worth the Reward, which is when a unit fails a panic test, you may re-roll those dice, or if you have the bags, you automatically pass it. And then number 2, Bribery, where you can replace the bags with 1 NCU may not activate this round. Did you see either of those cards during your game against him?
yes, both briberies and at least 1 Worth the Reward that he then picked up the dice, re-rolled them, and at least as far as we understood Worth the Reward, you have to re-roll the panic test. He didn't have the money bag, and I think it actually ironically caused him more damage because he rolled a 1 on the white die the first time. Gary can correct me. That was definitely one of those I'm sorry moments that I said to Gary. Like, I even pointed it out. I'm like, hey man, you got to re-roll all those dice. You only rolled a 1. Are you sure you want to do that? And he was like, shut up. I know what I'm doing. And then he threw the dice down and he was like, why'd you let me do that?
Oh my gosh.
Bribery did come out, and he turned off one of my NCUs one time. I don't think it was Mel. However, it worked out, like he couldn't get it out there before Mel was activating. He definitely also turned off my Bastards Girls. He had to use that to shut them down because, like I said, I got behind him. So he was using that to try to mitigate the trauma that they were about to cause. So I know in one of the turns specifically, he used that to really good effect to just kind of stick them back there, but they didn't do a whole lot, where if he would not have used that, they were behind his Cutthroats and his Blackguard after they killed a unit of Cutthroats, and they were just going to powder one of those units. So yeah, I did see those, and I did feel that way too. I thought, between Tycho, having an ability to throw panic tokens out in Baratheon's not necessarily being well suited to deal with that, at least on that side of the faction. And then having those cards, I did think he would pose some challenges, but it was just a cascade of bad rolls. Like, that game might have been a lot more competitive if the rolls were different, and could probably be said for, like 50% of games of Song of Ice and Fire. But I really will say, like, he just really did not roll well at all. Like the whole game too.
It sounds like Gary to me.
Brutal, yeah. But he's such
Was he using Baratheon dice?
I don't think he was using I forget what the heck dice he was wearing. He definitely wasn't using the Sunday Slaughter androgynous turquoise dice.
We can get into those dice in a second. Actually, let's go ahead and talk about that, Max. I want to hear from your side of the story how our match went, and see if it differs any from what I think.
Yeah, well, first, a quick word from our sponsor. Are you tired of rolling shitty against Mel? Maybe you get Mel bombed off the table in 3 rounds. Well, Chris has got the trick for you. It's turquoise androgynous steel dye. With little Bolton Sunday Slaughter logos on the 6s, you're guaranteed to roll a 6 or maybe a 5 every time. Maybe you just want to throw one of these bad boys in your pocket and make yourself look like a psychic when you roll a 6 and guess it every time. So, back to me now. The way that game went, I hope that Chris was actually filming a battle report, and I'm in the background of it, playing Chris. We weren't in the battle report, and I hope that the battle report has me spazzing out in the background because
it does for sure.
It does. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
like the first one, I think I took it pretty well. So let me paint a picture, guys. Bob does me just the absolute solid of giving us 2 low walls and a weirwood as our terrain. So it puts the weirwood right in the middle of the friggin' table, and then puts either of the low walls right up against the other two tokens there, the other 2 objectives in Dance with Dragons. So I'm already like, okay, this is not great, but Chris has got some sentinels, and they're not that close. And Brienne's in them; they're not that close to the weirwood. So he was smart enough to make sure that he went second. So he goes first in the second round, so he doesn't just get completely Melbomb eviscerated. And it wouldn't have mattered anyways, because I get the Roost tokens out there, throw the tokens out. I play the card that lets me look at his hand to make sure he doesn't have that Renly card that gasses up his morale tests. He doesn't.
I think I had six cards at that point too.
Yeah, and did not have that card. And I was like, okay, here it comes, baby. I'm going to do the same exact thing I did to my previous 2 opponents. Incoming can opener. He put his Stormcrow archers and his sentinels in the middle of the table. So he actually like played into my style of play where I'm like, oh, this is perfect. He's got a soft center. I'm just going to open up the middle and then pull into Renly so I can kill him. And I got the panic tokens out there, hit the sentinels with the Melbomb on 10. He passes it with 2-5. And so that's like the worst version of a panic test you want to see, because you don't want to leave the 5 out there, really. I mean, maybe I did. So I'm like, all right, pick up all those dice. He rolls a 6 and 4, passes it again. And at that point in time, I'm sure the camera and me in the background would show that I was pretty cool about it. I was like, all right, that'll happen. Dice will do that sometimes. And then, I forget exactly when I started to lose my cool with your panic test. I do know that I had one round where I was able to successfully Melbomb on the swords. The Melbomb finished off his Stormcrows, and then my swords.
Yeah, I had 5 wounds left. And I failed it. So
Melbombed him and took out the archers. And then with my claiming on the swords, which, again, this is one of the things I think is going to be really good about 1.7. I had that free 3-inch shift node on the Bastards Girls at that point in time, so I had moved into your flank with the Sentinels, and I was able to shoot them and then, shift, shoot, and charge, and one-shot that unit too. And I'm sure at that point in time, you, Chris, were like, well, this game's over. And I was thinking...
I remember thinking that when your Bastards Girls got on that objective that gives you the 3-inch maneuver, when you play Dance of Dragons, your movement is reduced down to 2 inches. But I realized that they are still a threat when you have that objective. Every round, being able to shift in a direction to get into range for a shot and then charge. Yeah, it dawned on me that was a bad idea to let you get to that first.
Right. So I did that, did my can opener, and then proceeded to launch pillows and fart blasts and insults at Renly's unit of Rose Knights ineffectively. And anything that got anywhere near Renly's unit of Rose Knights was like walking into a bug zapper. It just evaporated. It didn't matter what it was. Wardens, cutthroats, bastards, girls, didn't matter. He became just an absolute killing machine. And was single-handedly taking down my whole army.
Yeah, you brought up the fact that none of my units attacked except for Renly's unit of Rose Knights.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were the
it was-
only ones that got to roll dice, which is crazy.
Right.
But you also said at the end of the match that when you're playing Rose Knights, it's either they work or they don't. You know what I mean? And that match
Right.
they worked.
Oh, you were hitting. So for the audience, I got my Bastards Girls behind him like I did in the other game modes. So I was indirect, and he was trying to he had a node at the time, so he could only move 2 inches, and he was trying to play damage control because I had Cutthroats and Wardens bearing down on him, and then Bastards Girls behind him, and he was doing the clever maneuvering so that he wouldn't get hit in the back, and he was using the low wall that was on top of him so that my guys would have to go over that. And I probably got over aggressive because of how poorly my previous opponents rolled, and just thought I'm just going to kill this guy. And what I really probably should have done is just use the Cutthroats and Wardens like fodder to just kill you with Mel bombs. And instead, I foolishly charged into those bastards, and with everything I had, thinking okay, 3 units on 1, they're bound to fail some panic tests. And that was my fatal flaw. They were not bound to fail any panic tests, even from Bastards Girls in the flank. Didn't care. Did not mind at all. I think multiple times because of the Red Priestess, I had panic tokens on you too, and you'd be rolling at a 9, and you'd pass it, and you'd pass it again, and it was man, I couldn't get you to stop doing it. There was a point where I actually made the comment dude, you got to roll my dice, and I think it stunned you so hard that you agreed. You actually asked me on your very next attack. You're like, hey, do you want me? Which also goes to show the audience how good of a sport Chris is. He actually asked me, hey, man, do you want me to roll your dice? And I was like, don't touch my fucking dice, asshole. You shouldn't get this over with.
Well, okay, I literally looked at you when I passed one of the key panic tests, probably mid to late game, and you looked at me, and I thought that you may have thought that I loaded my dice. You had a look on your face, and I was like, "Oh man, Max probably thinks that these dice are loaded. I should probably at least try to fail a panic test here because I can't let anyone know that the Sunday Slaughter dice are loaded."
Yeah, yeah. They're those things are really good. Go on his site. I'm sure they're there with the ultra deep sleeve cut sleevelesses and the hoodies with the logo on there, and then you look up loaded androgynous turquoise teal, and you will have those, and you will smite down your opponents with whatever you happen to be rolling. You could have 30 points of free folk against 40 points of stark hotness, and you'll take care of them. You'll be all right.
Well, I mean, I think I'm not going to disagree with you, Max, because that you pretty much outlined all the key moments in our match. One little thing that I'll add is I think the unsung hero for me of that match was the low wall that I had with Renly.
100%.
I knew that you were going to be focused on my 2 units, which had the worst morale, which were my Stormcrow archers and my Sentinels, which you did, and you were eventually able to take them out. But I knew that if you were focused on them and I could get Renly onto an objective behind the low wall and just keep it, I felt like although my chances were slim, I could still have a chance to win the match just because he would be gaining those 2 points every round. And like you said, my dice rolls were hot, and luckily I was able to win the match. It was what, 10 to 6?
Yeah, maybe 9-5. It was a 4-point differential.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
4-point differential.
Yeah, 30-point games they end at 8 points instead of 10 in regular 40-point matches. But you were able to prevent me from winning first place because only getting a what is it called, a regular victory, major victory.
I think I TO'd it before. That's called a cheap janky dice win. I'm teasing, actually, for the audience and everyone. Chris is an awesome sport to play. He's one of my favorite people to play too, and he piloted his army perfectly. I would actually say that I made some mistakes. I used the Dragonstone Noble really poorly. So he definitely fielded his army better than I fielded my army because I kind of had like one game plan. And then when that didn't work out, I didn't really have a backup plan. And, he was able to kind of pivot. And even when things weren't looking great for him, he was able to come up with a way to win the game. So, and I'd even said it in your Discord at one point in time. It's not an auto win when you're rolling good. I've played against people who were rolling hot as hell, and I still slugged them. But yeah, I wanted to keep my Dragonstone Noble close enough to the rest of my army to try to trigger his ability. When really I should have thought, like, your army's slow. You're gonna have a hard time even hitting me if you even attack me at all. And I really should have thrown him down the opposite flank of Renly to just go grab that token and then make your wardens chase him around over that low wall. But you play your matches and you get that practice in, and you have the experience that I may have years in the game, but I think you certainly have me on matches played. So you really played it great.
Thanks, man. And like I said, the standard victory. No, it's not standard victory. What is it called, Charles? For a 4-point differential.
Some books say major, but when we update it, I think it's standard now. Like it's referenced both ways depending on which rule book or patch you're looking at. Gotcha. So it's like narrow, standard, and crushing.
So the standard win that I got against Max went up against Brandon's final score for his third match because both of us were at that point undefeated. And Brandon, you got your crushing win, I believe. So that trumped my points destroyed because although I destroyed more points than you, it ultimately goes to that as deeming the winner. So you took first place, and I got to ask, how did it feel? I was a little bit salty because Max wouldn't go down. He didn't just let me get the win. He wanted to play it out, which actually helped you. Max, in fact, said that I think he made a play with his Dragonstone Noble into my Wardens to make me drop a token, and they didn't. And he was like, well, this game's over. And I was like, let's end it. Max was like, nah, let's play this out. So, yeah, so how did it feel, Brandon?
Oh, I mean, I haven't won a tournament. I think the best I've done before this was like 7th place. So, I felt pretty good. I won't lie. I did have a little bit of luck against Derek. At the end of one of the rounds, I was at 7 points, and I had Jon Snow holding an objective, and I had Ghost holding one, and then he charged some cutthroats in, kind of as a last-ditch effort to make Jon Snow drop the token, and I was able to kill him. It got me all the way up to 11 to make sure it was a crushing victory. So I think that's what it's called, right? Crushing. So, but I had a lot of fun. I was happy to be a part of it, and I always have fun at the tournaments. So,
I mean, there you have it. That was pretty much the rundown from the top 3 players, me, Max, and Brandon, at this tournament. But I do not want to understate the reason why we put it on, and it was for the newer players in our community. And I was able to talk to a few of the players and sort of listen in on their matches, and it seemed like they had a lot of fun. Did you guys get to talk to any of the newer players and see how it went for them?
Yeah, I talked to a couple of them. Mike I did a demo with him 6 days before the tournament, and he came in. I do believe he lost all 3 matches, but he learned a lot, which is
he won a game.
Important.
He won his last match.
Oh, I thought he told me he lost all 3. I'm not talking Mike M. I don't remember his last name.
We had 2
Mike, not Kip.
Yeah, not Kip. No, the other one. But yeah, he had just started on Sunday. I did a demo with him. 6 days later, he's in the tournament. So it's good to see new players getting into it and really wanting to play. So
yeah, and just a shout out to you guys too as a community, right? Like to give a demo in 6 days and have somebody feel comfortable enough to show up to an event day and not be intimidated says a lot for how you presented your community as well as the event. Because that's not easy. To get people to show up to tournaments is hard, even with veterans. Because people talk a good game, but then they don't feel like getting up in the morning and like show up and stuff. So like getting a guy 6 days out to actually show up and not be scared to throw dice is a big achievement in and of itself. like for any miniatures game. Like that's that can't be understated, overstated enough. That's a huge thing for you guys. That's a big win, and it's impressive.
How about you, Max? What'd you hear from the tournament? Did you talk to anyone?
Yeah, so it was pretty nice because even in the first game, it was me and Bob, and we were playing next to two newer players, and I think that worked out great because they were able to ask us a lot of questions while we were playing, and we were able to help them out. So it was cool to share in that, to walk around the room and compliment paint jobs or different army styles too, and just make sure that they feel like they're a part of something. One of the things that always keeps me engaged in our game group is that we have a really, really strong group for it. And I've said a million times before, like I play any game with you guys. So it happens to be Song of Ice and Fire, and that's cool, and it's a great game. But if everyone, played whatever, we're like, hey, we're playing checkers today, I'd probably play that with you guys too, So but yeah, it was really cool to have that opportunity to interact. And the new players did seem to have a lot of fun. Some of our returning old players had a really good time too. And I even remember them saying that they're walking away and they're like, this was really dang fun. I don't know why I came away from this in the first place. So, and I think part of maybe that's a little bit the testament of the style of the tournament was too, the idea to back Walder and Varys out unless it was neutral army, maybe keep it at 30 points so the games didn't drag too long and so you could actually get to an end point without bringing too much steam. So yeah, I thought that was really, it was unfortunate because actually I wanted to play newer players and kind of do the whole like throw Renly out there, make some misplays and let them get some cheap wins. And then I ended up getting stuck against Bob in the first match. And then it was like, oh, well, I can't let him beat me.
I think it worked out to where all three of us were put up against veteran players. So I played Jeff, who has been featured on the channel before with his Clegane army for round 1. And then round 2, I played Derek, who was a returning player. And Brandon, you said that you played Tim, which is the opponent that you probably played the most out of everyone in our gaming group. So it just worked out to where, unfortunately, we weren't able to play against any of the newer players. But I think that's still fine because newer players against newer players, you're still opening up opportunities for them to learn something from each other. So one thing that I definitely want to shout out is the support that we got from CMON, which was awesome. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but they sent 2 boxes of skirmishers, a box of, was it Spearwives? I know it was a Free Folk box. And they also sent alternate sculpts for Spearwives and conscripts, and then the grand prize was a Targaryen starter set. I mean, that's just amazing. The way that we decided to hand out the prizes was it wasn't first place that got to win the starter set. We did everything by raffle, so everyone was fortunate enough to actually walk away with something, at least a unit box. So not only shout out to CMON for sending the awesome prize support, but Gamers Haven, Max, your dad was kind enough to donate some prize support as well. So it was really great to see everyone walk away with something, and I think that really was awesome.
Yeah, I can't wait to see Gary fielding the Targaryen since he keeps winning them.
Yeah, he got the like, it wasn't actually best sportsman. Dad did a reverse raffle where the last person called from the raffle got the Targaryen starter, and Gary won it, which is pretty cool because I think he's also won a best sportsman before. So it kind of almost felt like that, but like we talked about, he's a total delight to play. He's really good. But then, yeah, Bob got that going too. So don't forget that was Bob and talking to someone over there at CMON, and they give us all kinds of stuff. It was great.
Yeah, on the topic of prize support, for community members, like I think Carl from West Coast Brahman's got an event coming up where he's gotten in contact with Organized Play. I think he's got some support coming. Not every event is getting Organized Play support, but that it's good that they're interacting. And we as player bases, if you were a little nervous about going to tournaments, don't be. Come to these events. Show CMON and your community organizers that you do care about the game and show up. It's going to help them get product if they didn't get it before, and it's going to really show CMON that people are showing up to events and want to play their game in an organized method. So if you want to do your part, if you're not like a real vocal person and you're not a real like go out there and organize your own thing, that's cool. It's like it's not everybody's that kind of person. We talk a lot of crap and it's clearly in our nature. So like we're very forward people and that's great. But like if you're just like a supportive show up and play and roll dice kind of guy or gal or whatever, show up and show out and support people and do what you can because they're doing better. And people who are really passionate about the game or putting in real work. Shout out to Bob. Shout out to Carl. Shout out to Carlo and the guys run the GT in Europe who are trying to get support going and stuff there. Like, Chris Eustace, Daryl from NRG, all those guys. Do what you can to show up and whatever. Like, and don't buy into like the noise of we can't get in touch with them or it's just reward the positive. There's events. People are showing up. CMON is responding in some capacity. Like, show up and show out. That's all we can do. And I think it sounds awesome.
Absolutely. Bring the show to a close. I definitely want to also give another shout out to Mike Kipp. I don't know if that's his full last name, but he goes by Mike Kipp on Discord. He's one of our newer local players, and he was kind enough to set up his crazy, elaborate terrain for the featured matches that I shot battle reports for from the event. So I'm excited for you guys to see what he did. It's very creative. He went above and beyond what I've seen anyone do with terrain, which is really, really great. He's able to flex his creative muscle there, and it was a totally different experience for me to be able to play on that table with 3D werewood trees and the castle walls and stuff like that. So stay tuned for the battle reports I have coming out that I filmed at the event. Max, I'll start with you. Do you have any shout outs before we close out the show?
I think everyone we mentioned here, but big shout out to Bob for running the tournament. Usually I'm the guy running the tournaments. And so this was actually my first Song of Ice and Fire tournament, believe it or not, in person. I did your Sunday Slaughter one with list picking and everything, but that was actually my first tournament, and this was my first one in person, even though we've hosted, about half a dozen now, because usually I run them, and I think Bob realized in the middle of that tournament why I don't play in them. I'll tell you who maybe didn't have a ton of fun at the tournament was Bob. But that's because he was trying to play in it too. And in the past, what I've done, he said he felt he had to because there was odd number of players. What I've done in the past, any info for anyone running a tournament, if you got an odd number of players, just let the person have the bye, which gives them an automatic win, but play them. So the game doesn't actually have any weight behind it. So I stayed at one table when I would run this. So I never moved where I was at on the table. So I didn't have to run around or anything. I could keep all the papers and everything close to me. And it didn't matter if I had to walk away from the table to answer rules questions and everything, because the game that I was playing actually had no weight in the tournament. I think if Bob could do it over again, he probably would have done that. Because I could tell it was pretty stressful for him to try to set up everyone's terrain and play in his own game and keep all that straight and answer rules questions. And so, yeah, that I think he learned from that. But I really appreciate him doing that and not and allow me to just kind of show up. I worked on Saturday when we had the tournament, so I just showed up from work and got to play, and that was pretty darn cool too. So big shout out to him. Big shout out to Gamers Haven for hosting. Like you mentioned, Chris, Dad just started throwing out unit boxes. So
as he
it
does,
was crazy. Like he does, exactly. So anybody, CMON provided that starter and I think like half a dozen unit boxes. And Dad basically said that everyone else's $15 tournament entry fee would cover unit boxes. So he just let everybody who didn't want one of the things that was on there, when they got pulled for their raffle, they got to walk over the shelf and grab a unit box.
And he fed us. As
well. We had kosher subs for Chris for undisclosed reasons. So he fed everybody and came up with the remainder of the prize support too. So Gamers Haven, a great place. We'll try to always keep you guys notified if we're running other stuff. So if you want to come in from out of town, make it a trip with some of your buddies, we'd love to have you.
Most definitely. All right, Brandon, any shout outs?
Yeah, obviously, Gamers Haven for letting me come up there 3 days a week, 2 of them to play Song, and Bob for running the tournament. But I'd also like to shout out Tim. I don't know if he's on here or not, but Tim, we practice tournament lists, and he kind of helped me narrow down on the one I wanted to bring, both Gior and John. So I'd like to give him a shout out for, playing me every week. And a shout out to Max for, stopping you from beating me.
Yeah, you can't let that one go. I'm still a little salty about it, but all right, Charles, do you have any shout outs?
Yeah, I actually got a few this time around. We can talk about making your own fun kind of in the slow news weeks and lead up into 2021. And we've got a lot of people doing that lately. You got Tabletop Wardens and Yannick and those guys are doing a design your own Grey John Umber, like commander, like tactics cards, commander attachments, and attachment model, which is a little contest they're doing on their Discord server. People should check that out. There's also rules posted on the Facebook groups. You've also got Rossi's been doing like a rules update, like database website too, which is really cool. You guys did a 30-point tournament, which is a ton of fun and like innovative. Somebody's putting together a narrative campaign as well coming up that they're working on. And then we have Authel, for those of you who follow some of the various Discords. Laura knows me and Authel argue over rules enough, but he's been rebasing a lot of his Night's Watch stuff with these like crazy diorama scenic bases, which look fantastic. So like hobby stuff is full blown. People are doing just fun, different things to get people playing the game and stay excited about the game. So shout out to all you big hobby people and just people just engaging with the lore and the canon and the community and the game all in that unique way. It does a lot to keep people like me who are more about tournament chasing and things like that still engaged and entertained. So it's been really cool to see you guys do that stuff. And that's just kind of a general community shout out for sure.
All right. And my last shout outs are, of course, I mentioned Mike before for providing the 3D terrain for the battle reports that we shot. I can't say thank you enough to Gamers Haven for running the tournament and giving me a place to play and film battle reports. Big shout out to Bob. Thank you for running the tournament. He seemed a little stressed out by the end of it, but I think we all knew that it was worth it. Seeing the smiles and hearing the laughs from all the new players was really great. And then lastly, most importantly, I want to shout out Renly for really carrying all the work for me in my game against Max. Renly has sealed the deal as the superior Baratheon brother. He also sealed the deal that he's now Max's stepdad. Shout out to Max for being a great opponent, not being salty over my dice rolls.
I'm salty, but I didn't flip a table or anything. I can't wait to see me spazzing out in the background. People who listen to this podcast are probably like, that guy seems cool and pretty relaxed. And in the battle reports, he's friendly and he laughs a lot. And then they're going to see me in the background of that game, just losing my shit. I like throw my mask off at one point in time. Like at one point in time, I just look at the dice and then I just stare to Chris for probably like 2 minutes. There was no talking. It was just
Oh yeah, if there's one thing that people can look forward to for that battle report is, although Max and I are not playing in it, as he mentioned, we are in the background playing it. So whenever something like that happens, stay tuned, and I'm going to zoom in on Max's face whenever I pass a panic test. So you guys should be able to enjoy that. Of course, thank you to Charles, Max, Brandon. Thank you for joining me today on this podcast.
Thank you for having us, Chris.
Of course. And with that, I think we are out.